Good evening. My name is Christina Rush, and I would like to share with you my narrated slide deck presentation. I am currently in my third year as a school counselor at Oakland Middle School, where I work with adolescents grades 5th through 8th. Before that, I worked as an elementary school counselor for 14 years at a neighboring school district where restorative practices weren't a thought. So the opportunity to work somewhere where they were being implemented and fully utilized was very exciting for me. Before my time, my school had implemented restorative practices and had begun seeing great benefits as a result. Improved relationships and school culture, increased community, and a significant reduction in out-of-school suspensions and overall behavior disruptions. And then COVID hit. Life as everyone knew it turned upside down. So much was put on the shoulders of educators during that time that restorative practices unfortunately had to take a back seat. The mental health issues that arose did not, and the realities of our students have included, obviously, far more than this list can offer, but just a few: parental and students' substance abuse, exposure to domestic violence, a drastic increase in child abuse and neglect, financial food insecurity, job loss, homelessness, family separation, unprocessed grief, and obviously, as mentioned multiple times, mental health issues or an exacerbation of already underlying issues. Adverse effects of all of that, this again is not comprehensive, but just to name a few: significant academic, emotional, and social regression, disconnect from school, family, friends, social relationships, life in general for some, anxiety, physical, emotional health issues, some trauma cases, and obviously at-risk behaviors. So after unearthing ourselves in that first year, we realized we had to get back to some sense of normalcy. We began a painfully slow rollout of restorative practices, beginning by training staff again and implementing weekly community building circles during homeroom time for all grade levels. We encouraged use of restorative practices on the informal level, the affective statements and questions, and obviously small impromptu conversations that they were already doing often. And we left the formal practices like conferences or restorative or repairing harm circles to the trained administrators and yours truly, the counselor. This was met with a lot of resistance and in turn non-compliance. There's been an inconsistent use of restorative practices overall, and we have certainly paid the price as a result. There's really been no accountability system or monitoring and really no enforcement of using these restorative practices. So we have seen a reduction in empathy in both students and staff. We have seen a disconnect and a lack of relationships that have been built. It definitely had a negative impact on overall happiness and connectedness at school for both students and staff. It's a lot more punitive, both with teachers and administrators. We've seen an increase in out-of-school suspensions and discipline referrals and just overall counterproductive behaviors. And an all or nothing mindset has become the norm. If a small group is engaging in counterproductive behavior, all of them have to pay the price, which is obviously not exactly just or fair. And we had administered a student survey that was assessing whether or not students felt they had at least one caring adult at school, and it showed 8% of students felt they had no connection with an adult or at school in general. So what can we do? Well, I started by flat out asking my students how best to learn than to ask your learners directly. And as I often am, I am their voice and their advocate. So I asked them what they thought of our current social and emotional learning. And unfortunately, the majority of them said the only SEL that they receive is when the counselor, yours truly, and we actually have a second counselor now for 5th and 6th grade, when we come in to do monthly, sometimes if we're fortunate enough to have the time, bi-monthly SEL lessons. They said some teachers will offer those weekly circles where they do have a safe space to share and connect. And on occasion, some mental health concerns or coping skills are taught during their health curriculum. Regardless, not enough by far. So how do we correct this? We need to educate all, both students and adults alike. We need to help them understand how their social and emotional learning is correlated directly with restorative practices, how the process through which children and adults understand and manage emotions is the same process that allows them to build and strengthen relationships. The two working hand in hand can be one school-wide initiative that can improve our overall school community and sense of connectivity. I'm amazed at how many adults in my school don't understand the importance of their own social and emotional learning in mental health and how it directly impacts how they interact and teach our students. They don't realize that students don't do as we tell them, they do as they see we do. We are always modeling whether we realize it or not, and they are looking to us on how they are supposed to respond. We need to work on building those connections and sense of community by offering these safe spaces for all of us to reconnect, share, listen, and heal. All of these things allow both students and adults to establish and strengthen relationships, which is the heart of restorative practices. When they're used together, it can create a positive community where they can actually put those social and emotional learning skills and competencies into practice and hone those skills and again strengthen those relationships. So when I've done my trainings with my coworkers, because I do see my role as a leadership role, but I'm also not their direct authority figure. So I don't feel like they feel as if they have to do as I say. I'm simply offering them a way of improving their classroom experiences. So I present it in such a way that it isn't a set of instructions or a curriculum or one more program they have to implement. It's a mindset. It's a way of being. You don't do restorative practices. You just are. When you have a restorative mindset, any interaction can be restorative. It is a way of behaving. It's a mindset. I try to help them not overthink it. I share my own, testimonials of success and testimonials of, oops, that didn't go as planned. I let them know human nature, it's ever changing. And so you are going to have bloopers. You're going to have things that don't work out, and that's okay. That in and of itself can be a teachable moment. I wanted them to know this is something to help them tweak what they're already doing. It's not one more thing on their agenda that they have to do. I try to make it as non-invasive as I possibly can. So that said, I feel that restorative mindset can allow us to model effective ways of building and maintaining emotionally healthy relationships. It challenges us to refocus our outlook so those relationships become the center of all of our interactions, including those that involve discipline. We teach them problem solving and empathy, impulse control, effectively communicating, active and reflective listening, and understanding the impact of our actions on others. So many people mistakenly think that restorative practices and restorative justice allows someone to get away with something. And we all know that couldn't be farther from the truth. Consequences still happen. But what it allows is the reparation of harm, a reintegration back into the community, and a repair of relationships. And again, in turn, building empathy and overall respect for one another. I emphasize that when we have an argument with our spouse or a family member or our own children, we don't just punish them and outcast them and not try to repair that harm later. The same should be true and modeled for our students. They are human and they're going to make mistakes, but they should be held accountable. But they should never feel as if they have no opportunity for redemption. I will review for our staff in training the Restorative Practices Continuum. go over the basic fundamentals and the expectations for each of those. And finally, our official plan. My administration plans for our next school year to enforce restorative practices implementation. That includes accountability for teachers, a monitoring checklist, and making it mandatory. I'm not sure how this is going to go, but we shall see, and we have to try because what we're doing is not working. What this will look like is more opportunities for circle time, more frequent circle time expectations and community building practices, increased opportunities for students to repair the harm upon any return from out of school suspensions, and more inclusive in-school reparations of harm, more inclusive consequences and opportunities. And building, practicing, and reinforcing those social emotional learning competencies for both adults and students. And we do that by investing in our adults, their self-care, well-being, and their social and emotional learning. We can't possibly model something we haven't learned or managed ourselves. We will see an improvement in school and classroom climate, academic performance, effort, engagement, attendance, hopefully less disciplinary action and referrals, equity for all students, inclusiveness for all students, a stronger sense of community, and an overall improvement in school safety. So our final and bottom line, human beings are hardwired for connection. When we focus on building and maintaining positive and healthy relationships, significant changes can occur. I would like to thank you all for your attention, and that concludes my narrated slide deck presentation. Thank you and have a good evening.